What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Team Solomon Circus live videos. Here we're going with something very different. The ban list had just hit, so we are going to be doing a little bit of a ban list type tier list here. We have seen a bunch of cards being hit. I'll be pulling up the list right away to tell you guys. We're not going to be focusing exactly on the list here. We saw 4 cards that were banned. We saw Lacrima, Appaloosa, Calamities, as well as Beatrice. Beatrice definitely hurt a bunch of decks in the Fiendsmith engine. You know, we mostly see the Fiendsmith cards being hit here with Lacrima as well as Beatrice. And obviously Appaloosa, we know that card's going to be gone. It's actually going to affect a bunch of different decks here. Now, for Limited, we see Ava, Snake Eyes Ash, Poplar. Ava come back off the list. It was at 0 prior. We see 2 Game Public cards being hit. We see a Brand Infusion being hit, which is very unfortunate. We see an opening, which is the of the Spirit Gates. It's going to be the Ubel hit on this list. We see a Prod of Prosperity hitting a bunch of different decks on this list here, but mostly we see this list kind of aiming towards, you know, taking down the consistency of the decks, making hand traps more reliably to stop them here. We see Sangan Summoning, which is the field spell for the Tempai players, going to be hitting that as well, making it so that they are mostly affected other than if you want to search it off the copy of Hydra or the copy of Terraforming. And we see that ass is greener. I mean, I don't even know. It's going to make some Chaos Packs, which is why we added this in here. It's going to make some of those decks kind of be more played. I don't think it's going to do that much. Then we see Skill Drain to accompany it by those Floodgates. Now for the Semi-Limited, we see the Rulers come back. We see Lunalight Tiger, Colossus, and Ib. None of those really matter. And then for Unlimited, we see Armageddon Knight, Red Rose Dragon, Kieran, Plush Fire, Ancient Fairy Dragon, Denglong, and Time Seal. So Time Seal definitely is not going to be doing that much. I know some people are thinking that it's going to be doing something for the Labyrinth deck. I disagree myself, but we're going to be diving on in. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and more content like this. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. And if I didn't mention a deck, let me know in the comment section, and I'll make sure to feature that deck in the tier list here, telling you guys where it's at and why it's there. So we're going to start off with the deck I've been playing, Memento. None of these decks are necessarily in order. I'm going to put this in high tier 1. I think that, you know, tier 1, tier 2, and Rogue and tier 2 kind of like mesh together. Now, I think this deck is really good. You know, it's going to get more support. It also can still play the Fiendsmith stuff, able to end on the Desiree. Now, we do see with the cards, like it has like 9 1-card starters. Maybe I'm just biased, but I think this deck is very, very good in this format. I think it's able to play a bunch of different hand traps. It didn't get hit at all on the list other than losing a copy of Lacrima and the Beatrice, which just turns our, 9 1-card combos. We had 12 prior because the copy of Engraver was a combo. So instead of going for 12, we now have only 9 1-card starters, which is like, oh no, 9 1-card starters. But you definitely can play the deck without the Fiendsmith cards. It's very good. So I'm going to put that in high tier 1, or we can even put it in tier 2, lower area. We are going to be going into, like, immediately, I'll just jump in, Tempai. Now, Tempai isn't tier 0, but it's going to be one of the best decks of the format. All we see was Prosperity and the field spell being hit. So, you know, that's not going to do very much for the deck. Obviously, they're still able to play. They're still going to have their Pydras, their Chandras, and all this stuff like that can be able to OTK you consistently enough. They just don't have the copy of Prosperity. Oh, no. Snake Eyes, we all know this card's going to be one of the best tier 1. Now, tier 1 is going to be kind of crazy. Like, we can even change this if we wanted to like tier 1 and then tier 1.5, because these decks are actually so close together that it's not going to matter. Like, these cards are just going to be absolutely insane. We saw Ash, we saw Poplar being hit. Oh no. Anyways, we still have 3 Bonfire, which means we have 4 copies of Ash. Now, if we do have to normal summon the Ash or normal summon the Poplar, it's going to be definitely hurt. Now, the only time it actually matters in this, like where this list actually hurt the deck, is that Poplar is at 1. So if you do hard open the Poplar and you have another normal summon, or you have a copy of Bonfire, then you have some bricks in the hand. Now, if you normal summon Poplar, it's still going to be full combo, so it's not going to matter that much. And Flamebird is still going to be a card, therefore you're going to have the mass recursion that you're getting already. So looking at the next, we're going to pull up Ubel. Same thing. Opening, all this does is, you know, now Ubel has lost the copies of opening down to 2, or down to 1 now, actually. So they lose 2 cards in their deck, which means that opening up Beast, if they're now playing 2 Beasts, they're definitely going to be upping it to 3. But Beast now is more susceptible to hand traps. If you do a copy of Imperm or Valorant, their turn could end if they don't have a way to put it back, or put something back to summon out another body on the field if they don't have a copy of Shavar or something like that. But it definitely hurts the deck significantly more, not having that additional normal. Starting off with the gates, let them play through draw a little bit more, and already having the gates, let them play as well. But we just see, obviously the consistency, which I think is kind of the key point of this ban list, to kind of like slow down the game a little bit. We see Appaloosa being gone, we see Lacrima being gone, and stuff like that. Just slowing it down, making it so that they're kind of fair when you want to exchange those hand traps. for like certain different areas. Now, whether or not that's going to be successful, I don't know, but we're about to find out. So, we're going to be going up next with the White Forest, White Woods, whatever you want to do it. I think this deck is still very good. Now, it's going to be paired up with the Centurion and the Runic cards as well, because the Runic cards were untouched, but I think this card's not that good, you know. Obviously, we're trying to Centurion, or I guess Calamities lock you prior, but now it's not going to do that much. Now, the Runic cards are still very good, so we're going to be seeing most likely that going to be still striving. But the deck just has a lot of hard times going up against the top 3 decks here, which is going to be kind of slowing a bunch of decks down. Now we do see Gaming Puppet. Now, unfortunately, Gaming Puppet actually kind of got smashed down to free. Now, this deck absolutely sucks. The only thing it had going for it was the FTK, and now it doesn't have that. It can't FTK at all. The FTK got shut off, which I think is absolutely crazy. I think it's one of the first times we've seen an FTK being hit in the most recent years. Just make it so they absolutely cannot, be happening. Not only the fact that they slowed down the FTK, they made it so it's just impossible. Like we saw a lot of times, you could still perform it. It just would lose to a hand trap. They just removed it and said, no, you're not FTKing at all. The game's kind of over. So I don't think that the deck is going to be doing anything now. I think it's essentially being lost in the dust. Good thing it wasn't expensive. Now we have Chimera. This is going to be the Illusion Chimera deck. I think this deck is absolutely amazing. Still able to play the Fiendsmith stuff. The Lacrima wasn't doing that much for them. Nor was the Beatrice. And I know that you could dump, the copy of the Chimera Fusion if you had the Illusion on the field. The Apprentice Illusion and like one of the Fusion monsters. Definitely able to be playing. But I think the deck is absolutely fine. You still have your copies of the Necron to go into the Fiendsmith combo by summoning out the Adjusted Gold and stuff like that. So definitely going to be a really good, still able to set up those boards. And they weren't making Appaloosa that often, so I still think it's going to be quite powerful. Branded, now I think this deck is still going to be at the high of tier 1. I'm going to put it a little above Chimera. And the deck is definitely hit. Branded Fusion to 1 definitely hurts the deck. But you got to think about it. We have Opening to 3. We have Aluber to 3. You have Branded Fusion. You have Quests. You have a bunch of other stuff that dump the card. Now, the deck's not dead. You might play 3 Cartesias. You may have to rely on different stuff now, but the deck definitely gets hurt with hand traps a lot more than it was before. Veiling a copy of Aluber, ashing the copy of Branded Fusion is definitely going to hurt the deck when you just don't have multiple copies. As well as, you can just banish it from the graveyard if you have to use a copy of the trap. We would see the Fusion duplication. By banishing the trap or banishing the copy of Branded Fusion, you're now no longer going to have access to it by having another one in the deck, which is definitely going to hurt the deck, as well. So kind of important to note that we did lose a bit of that, but the deck still has kind of the same power that it did before. Being able to get a puppet is still there. Now, it does look kind of crazy putting it so high on the list, but we don't have the cards filled out yet, so no matter how far we fill it out, we're going to be changing the stuff up here. It's not going to be that high when you look at it in the end of scheme things. Now, it can play 60-card builds like Grass is Greener as well, but I don't think we're going to be doing that. That card is kind of cope. It's at 1. You don't want to kind of clog up your deck with a bunch of unuseful cards just so you can mill multiple. Now we have Melodious. Now this deck is also going to be one of the better decks, tier 1.5, just underneath the copy of tier 1. It has a good matchup against the Fiendsmith as well as the Tempai deck. I guess I should say the Snake Eye deck as well as the Tempai deck. Being able to summon up the copy of Arya and then even a copy of the LG. Now it has lost its copy of Prosperity, being down to 1. But that's really only card that got hit from the list. Now we can just change that up by playing 2 Concerto and then making it so you have to fill only 1 slot in the deck. And, even maybe adding in Desires as well. The deck is still very, very good. It just feels very, very fair as well, which we're going to be seeing a lot more hand traps in this upcoming format. Voices Voice. Now I'm going to put that up here with tier 2 alongside the copy of White Woods. This deck is very, very good as well, but the problem is it isn't going to do too much. We see Prosperity being one of their best cards because you have not really 1-card starters. You have 2-card combos. So having those 2-card combos and then not being able to search the exact card that you need off Prosperity is going to hurt the deck, making the consistency coming even down. And again, struggle against the Flameburge deck, I guess the Snake Eyes deck, as well as the U-Bell deck. Let's have a good matchup against Tempai. Unfortunately, I think Tempai is going to be a little bit way too strong. Now, the Runic deck. Now, tell me this. Why was Tip and Fountain not hit? This deck is not just going to be Runic Stun we're talking about. It's going to be actually all the Runic stuff. So all these stuff we're going to be mixing with the Runic as an engine as well as the deck. This deck is absolutely just insane. It lost 2 copies of Skill Drain. Oh well, we have Synchro Zone, we have Card Scanner, we have every other card that we need. You have to still play this deck, and we have to still play against this deck, and you still have to prepare for it. If you don't prepare for it, it's going to absolutely wipe you. I think this deck is just going to be absolutely disgusting. People are still going to play it, and maybe even try to make it so it gets banned. Shifter also is really relevant. I don't know why that card's still staying, but that's going to be boosting up Tempai as well. We see a bunch of these decks getting hurt a lot by Shifter, so if your deck can play Shifter, you're definitely going to be boosted by that as well. Sprite, I think Sprite has a really good time. People are kind of playing, like downplaying it, looking at like the cards. Like we didn't see IP getting hit. We didn't see the copy of the bunny being hit. Obviously, the bunny is not going to be hit, but Silhouette Rabbit definitely helps the deck a lot. Toad still in the thing. We have so many different cards. Now, we didn't get Elf back, but we still have the copy of the Toad we can summon out. We have 2 copies of Toad potentially by having the trap. And we have a bunch of different cards to be able to play. Like, this deck is really, really good. People just have different decks to play. Like, when you're looking at the top decks here, Flame Birch, or the Snake Eyes deck, the Tempai deck, and the U-Bell deck, nothing else in the room really compares. Like, obviously, you can get lucky and end up taking some games, but there's really a huge difference between 1 and 1.5 here. Like, it's just absolutely insane, the gap that we have. Now, obviously, the hits that they did make, like I was mentioning earlier, definitely bring the gap a little bit smaller, but it's still quite there. One Snake Eyes Ash is able to do so much if you go uninterrupted compared to like a full Melodious board. Now, Labyrinth. Labyrinth did get a new trap we can play with, Time Seal. Now, let's be honest. Time Seal might be a gimmick you might see at a couple regionals, but it's not going to do that good. Obviously, you can still play the deck. It's just unfortunately not going to be that well. The deck does struggle a bit. When you see Simultaneous Cannon going to be able to come in hard, the deck has kind of changed how it plays. Not only are playing those copy with the furniture, but playing most heavy traps. But unfortunately, it's just not going to be that good. Now, Ritual Beast. I kind of got to say, this deck might just be tier 1. Now, this is going to be a hot take. Obviously, it takes a very good palette to play Ritual Beast, but this deck remained unhit. We have Protoss, we have Shifter. This deck might be the new Tempai deck. Obviously, it does have a little bit of a struggle going second, which is why we're going to be seeing some of the board breakers, like Eclipse, as well as maybe even copies of Raigeki being played. Copies of, Droplets, copies of, I think Dark Ruler No More is played in this deck. But being able to pilot this deck really well is going to be bringing the same kind of consistency tops as the rest of these decks here. Maybe if a good player was playing Tempai, most of them don't play Tempai, they're good players. This deck is absolutely brain dead. They'll be playing like any one of these. And if they do open up well, they're most likely will be able to top. So I think this deck is definitely going to be one of the tier 1 decks. Kashtira, I think this deck is a rogue deck. It's kind of hard to tell you the difference between a tier 2 and a rogue deck. The line is very, very thin. But rogue is, like, Kashtira is very rogue. It has obviously the Kashtira engine, but it has Unicorn and Fenrir still at 3. We did not get a Rise Heart back. A lot of players were speculating that we would get that back. But it just didn't do very much for us, and it did not come back at all. So, like, you do have your Kashtira monsters button. Probably the problem is that what people are playing the Mulch armies in the side deck, you definitely get like a few draws off that, and it's not going to be that good. Obviously, we're going to be seeing a lot of Ash, Imperm, Veiler, Mourners in the deck. So being able to like hit one of those cards, having no searches or searching for the monsters or the spells, definitely can hurt and be a turn ender there. Now, the Dragon Link deck. Dragon Link as a whole and Dragon Link as a Fiendsmith is definitely going to be a rogue deck. If you're not prepared for this deck, you're prepared to lose for it, because this deck is absolutely sick. A lot of them weren't even playing Lacrima. They can end on like copies of Regain. They can end on the copy of Libellion. They can end on a Desiree. They can end on a Silhouette Rabbit and a Seals, and that's going to be absolutely crazy. Now, fun fact with this deck is if it goes first, it can set up a Seals, summon out a copy of our good old friend. The same thing with Tempai. Being able to summon out the copy of the Draco, the Quaking Mirror Draco, which shuts off the U-Bow deck completely, shuts off a lot of the Snake Eyes deck, and then a bunch of the different decks in the Rogue category, being able to just like destroy copies of Melodious, as well as like Branded, which is really good. So definitely a Rogue deck that you should prepare for yourself, and if you haven't seen the deck, definitely get accustomed to the deck, because you are going to be maybe enjoying to play it as well as enjoy beating it. Centurion kind of reminds me a lot of the Whitewood cards. It did lose a bunch of the turn skip options that it had with the Calamities, but the deck is still quite good. Being able to set up pops, being able to set up the Synchro summons during your opponent's turn, going up for that copy of, I believe it's the one of the Stardusts, getting like an Omni Negate, which is kind of cool. Being able to do that is definitely going to be good. I would put that up in tier 2. Probably a little bit better or just as good as Voiceless Voice. With these decks, being able to summon out a copy of an Omni Negate can kind of be crazy. Like we see Voiceless and as well as this and Toad, but unfortunately just Sprite's a little bit better than these two here, being able to be more consistent and playing more non-engine. Mimighoul is definitely a rogue deck. It's a fun deck you can play, but don't expect to win like a YCS with the deck. But if you guys haven't read the Mimighoul cards, definitely do play read the Mimighoul stuff. They have really cool effects. Mimighoul Dragon just wipes your entire field. Very important to note. So if you're not prepared for that, you definitely can just lose going second to Mimighoul. Now, Sword Soul, Sword Soul is going to be in the uphill rogue. This is a category I wanted to add where it is a rogue-like deck, but the problem is the uphill battle you have to play is just so hard for it. You're most likely not going to be playing. The reward of playing this deck, this does not come there. You can play so many different decks, but it does the exact same thing. It's just a lot easier to play. But if you like a challenge, you definitely can play this deck. Now, Evil Swarm, or not Evil Swarm, but the Infernoid deck, I'm going to put in the Rogue deck as well. Now, this deck does get boosted with the Fiendsmith cards, like we mentioned earlier. You don't need to play Lacrima for it. It definitely helps out. And it can also play the copy of Grass is Greener. Being able to mill the Inferno cards never hurt. You have a bunch of different stuff you can play as well with this deck. It reminds me a lot of the Chimera deck with the Fiendsmith stuff, but unfortunately the Chimera stuff is a little bit better. Therefore, it's going to be put in Rogue, but you could debatably put it in the uphill Rogue. I'll get accustomed to these cards as well. Now, the Chaos stuff, I'm going to really put this in uphill Rogue. To be honest, I wasn't around when Grass is Greener was played. I'm fairly new to the scene, only 4 to 5 years playing competitively, but I just don't feel like this card's going to do very much. It's a 1 card that you play in a 60 card deck. The chances of you seeing it going first is very, very slim. Alongside, do you really want to fill your deck in? I know this mentions the Light Swarm cards, it mentions the Chaos cards, it mentions a bunch of different cards, but I just don't think it's going to be that good. Now, obviously, if you want to play the deck, I'm assuming most people are going to want to play a kind of pile deck, which is going to be fine. I just don't expect it to do that well in tournaments. Now, Ava. This card, Herald, kind of crazy. I'm going to put this in Rogue. It could definitely be a tier 2, but Drytron being able to summon a bunch of different Omni Negates on turn 0, and then having the Avas and Heralds and stuff like that, being able to negate, draw 2 more, or search for 2 more cards, search for more Omni Negates is definitely crazy. You're fueling up your copies of the Herald of Perfection, and just kind of crazy how we can just negate everything if it does go off. Now, I do think that Ash, Emperor, Mourner, Veiler is going to be all relevant, like we mentioned earlier in the deck, earlier in the meta duel analysis, whatever you want to call it, the tier list. So I definitely think that it's going to be hurting the deck a bit when you're able to Veiler one of their copies of the XYZ and stop them from adding back, or even DD Crowing. DD Crowing is going to be absolutely crazy this format. Being able to hit a bunch of different decks here, making it so that they are not going to be able to get the search, definitely is going to hurt this as well. But I just found that, hand traps are going to be in, board breakers are going to be out. Now for Raid Raptors. Raid Raptors is going to be, once again, an uphill Rogue deck. Now, you can still win with this deck, but unfortunately, it's just not going to be that good. When most people know what the deck does, which they do by now, because it has been around for a bit now, they're going to be able to stop the key parts of this deck. Therefore, you're going to be not winning as much duels as you could. But if you do find an unexpected player, expect yourself to be in a very, very good position, being able to send out 3 towers on this getting the game. Now, obviously, if you are new to the Yu-Gi-Oh!, definitely prepare yourself to read a bunch of the Raid Raptor monsters. They summon out 3 towers, which is going to be very hard for you to out. Heroes. A lot of players love heroes. Unfortunately, heroes are free. Nib is going to be relevant. Imperm, Ash, Veiler, Mourner, all this stuff hits heroes, and unfortunately, it's not their time to shine. Maybe it's going to be able to be played in uphill Rogue where people are going to still be playing heroes. I just don't think this deck is going to be that good. It doesn't have, unfortunately, enough room to play a bunch of those hand traps, which we definitely need in the format. Rescue Ace. Now, a lot of players are saying this deck was carried by Beatrice. I think this deck is going to be uphill Rogue into the Rogue type deck. The deck can be very good. Obviously, setting 4 cards and being able to destroy a bunch of stuff is definitely crazy. But the Beatrice definitely helped out with the Fiendsmith stuff, being able to get that consistency into the deck. You could go for a dump of a copy of the Hydrant, and then bring out the Hydrant with the copy of the princess that you end up going into by bringing out your copy of Sequence. Sequence bring out the copy of Lacrima. Lacrima bring out another body. Then you have your princess area in the field alongside another card, which can let you snowball into something better. Being able to bring out your Hydrant effect, summon out your bodies, and then just get the Turbulence to go off. Now, Beatrice is going to be gone, but that means you're going to be playing a bunch of more engine cards to kind of consist to that. Maybe more emergencies or preventers or even more Hydrants. I know some people are only playing 1 to 2 Hydrants. We're definitely going to be able to be seeing this deck and play against the deck. Snake Eyes is still very much a thing. We're going to be still seeing the Diabell at 3. Therefore, you can just set the OSS and then OSS someone will get a copy of Hydrant. Now for the last card, I know a lot of players were hoping that Kit Callus would come back. It did not. Gladly happy about that. I don't think this card is that good. I don't think that tier should be played. I honestly hate this deck. I know that might get a lot of hate, but we're going to put it in Rogue as well. Now, the deck is going to be good. It could potentially use the same thing as the Chaos decks. Like I mentioned earlier, same thing with the Inferno deck, that you could play 60 cards and play the Grass is Greener, but I just don't think that's going to be that good in this format. Uh, Other than that, I don't really know what else to mention. I think this deck is very like fair. I don't think that the cards need to come back. I don't think that any of the tier names need to come back. We kind of move past a format where everything just like snowballs into something else, which was like kind of the point of this list. I think that we just wanted to slow the decks down and make them so that it's more interaction and it's taking more time rather than like turn zero, make a board, break the board, and if you can't break the board, you just lose the game. So we see like Prosperity and like Appaloosa and stuff like that. Now we can actually interact with our opponent's boards using those hand traps that they have given us. To actually stop the decks. You know, a lot of decks still have one card combos, but we can still like interact with them to kind of like slow them down or get them to a board that is more dealable. And then we can kind of like play a grind game where, you know, we make a board, break a board, make a little board, break a little board, and just kind of play out and see who can do the better duelist. If you guys disagree with me, let me know in the comment section down below where you guys think that different cards should be. And if to stay safe, peace.